gonna cry. And I'm the president of Free Our Warriors. I want to know how you can fix one thing by totally breaking something else. That's exactly what happened when the changes were made to sexual assault, how it was handled in the military. There needed to be changes. Women were being raped. It was being ignored. But instead of fixing it and bringing everything to the scales equal, in doing so, the scales have tipped totally towards the accuser and away from the accused. I stand with any woman who's sexually assaulted. As a woman, I can only imagine what that would be like, but it's also a horrible thing to have one person wrongfully convicted. I want you to know that if my husband and I thought for 1 second that our son was guilty, I wouldn't be here talking to you. But after reading his record of trial many, many times, the investigative notes, and doing our own investigation, we know that he's innocent. Unfortunately, he joined the Army right when all those changes were being made. He was just 21 years old. A 27-year-old married mother of 4 approached him at a bar. They had drinks. They were seen dirty dancing. They were seen making out. She asked him to go back to his barracks and play. They drove her vehicle back to his barracks. They had consensual sex. At one point, she said she didn't want to take off her shirt because she didn't want him to see her C-section scar. So they concluded their having sex, and he asked for her phone number. She said she couldn't give it to him because she shared that phone with her husband. They kissed goodbye. She got in her car and she drove herself home. Why she ended up calling this in as a sexual assault is still baffling to me. She had what back in my day we called hickeys. How's she going to explain that to a husband? Or as she told the operator when she called 911, I need the morning after pill. Is that the first thing that you lead with when you've just been raped? No. She said she didn't remember what bar she was at. She didn't remember who the guy was. And I've been a nurse for 42 years, and it has always bothered me that she allowed a full exam, a full pelvic exam. She allowed pictures. She allowed them to swab for STDs. She refused specifically a DNA swab. If you had just been raped, wouldn't you want to know who that was? That's the only way you're going to find them if you don't know who they are. I think in the back of my mind, I've always thought that maybe she thought if I say that I was sexually assaulted, and that's how I can explain how I have these marks on me, and then it will just go away. But it didn't go away. It ended up with my son being convicted and spending 20 years, sentenced to 20 years at Fort Leavenworth. Our lives have been on hold for 9 years. We've spent over $300,000 trying to get justice for our son. It's not about the money. We have missed so much of his life. He could have been married by now. He could have had children, our grandchildren. He could have owned his own business. That was always a dream of his. But instead, he is sitting in this small 8x10 cell. He's missed out on seeing his brother. His nieces and nephews have grown up. He's missed all of that. His 3 best friends were his cousins. They're all married. One has a child, and Anthony still sits here. This has shaken my faith as a Christian woman. I have prayed so hard for justice. At one point, I prayed all day, the entire day, every free moment of my day. I came home, I was so mentally exhausted, I had to go to bed. But I've come to realize that maybe God has a bigger plan for Anthony. Maybe if this hadn't happened, instead of finding out he was going to prison, we would have gotten that knock on the door that many families dread, that their loved one was killed. I have to believe in God's bigger plan. Maybe his plan is to use Anthony's case to help bring to light this injustice and help right this wrong. My husband and I are 64 and 68, respectively. Our time on this earth is growing short, and it's heartbreaking that we have missed so much time with our son. He has another 10 and a half years left of his 20-year sentence. My worst fear is that one or both of us will pass away before he is finally free. My husband and I don't feel that the military should be handling sexual assault cases. I've listened to everybody who's talked here today, and I don't agree. I think this should be held in a civilian court. There's too much political pressure on commanders to make sure that they get convictions, to make sure that they have good numbers that show that the military is going strong on sexual assault. The investigators and the prosecutors will do anything to get convictions, even going so far as to bully women into becoming victims if there's not enough evidence otherwise. I have letters from 2 women with me who say just that, and their letters were ignored when they turned those letters in. It doesn't matter that there are innocent men being sent to prison for crimes they didn't commit. Having an accused labeled a victim, an accuser labeled a victim even before there's even been an investigation. How can that be? You're not a victim until it's proven you're a victim. Just because I say something happened does not mean it's true, and not just because I'm a woman. A woman does lie. I have worked in the female field my entire life, and I can tell you for sure, women will lie, they will connive, they can be evil. That's not to say that women are not sexually assaulted, because they absolutely are. But there has to be equal justice on both sides. In the military, in my son, with the convening authority, which they were just talking about, the convening authority is the one who decides to take this case to court-martial. They're the ones that pick the jury, basically, which you've already discussed. And the convening authority, when they feel that this shouldn't have been a conviction, they're afraid for their career, so they won't say anything. There's been evidence to that. The convening authority is the very person who decides on the first clemency. In my son's case, there were 3 jurors that were in the same chain of command. One of them had a prosecutor representing him in a different matter. In what world is that right? If a commander does decide against political pressure to overturn a case, we have politicians who say this sends the wrong message to victims. Is it only justice if the accused is convicted? There is no investigation done on behalf of the accused. Everything's done to try to make sure there's a conviction. The accused is guilty until proven innocent. In my son's case, 4 times during his case, the jury was told that if you can find him guilty by a preponderance of the evidence, the prosecutor told them that if more than likely than not, you think Santucci did this, you can convict him. This goes against the constitutional standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is now required in all 50 states and is in direct violation of his constitutional rights. We are asking for there to be an independent review of these cases. We are asking for justice for our son and any others who are wrongfully convicted. We want those responsible for these injustices held accountable. You've heard my voice now, and I want you to hear my son's voice. This is an excerpt from something he wrote when he had been in prison about 6 years. In 2012, at the age of 20, I was the first member of my family to become a paratrooper in the airborne infantry. In 2013, at the age of 21, I became the first person in my family to be falsely accused of sexual assault. Less than a year later, I sat in front of a judge who, with the wave of a hand, took away 20 years of my existence. That was 6.5 years ago. I've had many people tell me I should just go ahead and accept responsibility so I can get out sooner. I'd rather remain true to myself. In order to take the sex offender class at Fort Leavenworth, Anthony will be required to sign paperwork saying he's guilty. He has taken every other class that's required. One of the reasons given for denial of his last parole was that he hasn't been properly rehabilitated, referring to him having not taken that class. He has told us that he will spend his entire 20 years before he admits to something that he didn't do. Only in the military prison system is this a requirement. No other prison in the United States requires this.
Wrap up. I know you're.
Yes, I have 4 sentences. Making someone admit guilt should be against their constitutional rights. At the end of the day, I'm just a mom trying to get justice for my son and hopefully helping others get justice as well. It might be too late for my son, but it's not too late for other mothers' sons. And I wonder, why is there no committee that's holding meetings for the wrongfully convicted? Why do we only get 5 minutes to speak in a 2-day hearing or meeting? Please take the steps that need to be taken to bring the scales of justice back into equal balance. Thank you.
Thank you.
You both of you should know, and that we all appreciate your comments. And number 2, we've heard from other people previously with similar concerns, and there was one panel that are people who made the statements at the end of our meetings who recommended that we look at conviction integrity units. And so at our last meeting or the meeting before that, one of the subcommittees was directed to look at that issue. So I'm not the chair of that subcommittee, but I'm on it. And so I'm sure as we start looking into it later this year, we'll be contacting you to make sure we have all the information that you want us to consider. And then we will evaluate whether we think there should be such a thing, and if so, how they should proceed. So I do want you to know that we do listen. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Can I make one follow-up? This is Megan Tokash. You know, this committee is the Defense Advisory Committee on the investigation, prosecution, and defense of sex assault in the military. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think we are very loyal to that. And part of that important piece of our mission is to make sure that we hear opinions and voices like yours. So thank you for being here today. It's very important, and it's your voice is important to our goals and what we do here as a federal advisory committee.
Judge Smith, I think that's it for the day.
This public meeting is closed.